Hello everyone, my name is Nick and welcome if you're new. In this video we're going to talk about my favorite aroids. So just to recap, or if you're unfamiliar, an aroid is an umbrella term for any plant that falls into the Araceae family. So for example, philodendrons, monsteras, syngoniums, rhaphodophoras, these are all plants that belong to the Araceae family of plants, so they are referred to as aroids. Now, aroids have been kind of a hot commodity on Instagram and social media, or any planty corner of the internet at the moment, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about my personal favorite picks at the moment for my favorite aroids. There are so many aroids on the market right now, and I have a lot of aroids in my home, so it was very difficult to narrow this list down. I'm going to be talking about 6 today that I think are very notable in my opinion in my home. So the first one that I picked out to talk about today was this Philodendron pedatum. So I really love the shape of these leaves. That is my favorite thing. Well, maybe not this leaf so much, but these leaves up here, I just absolutely love the shape of it, and I've been really enjoying watching this one grow. I've had this one for about a year now, and when I bought it, it did not have all of this stem that it has right here. So it's definitely grown a significant amount for me. So that's very exciting because I love watching these plants grow. Now, philodendrons, I would say that I give them bright and direct light. I definitely don't want them in a dark corner, but they are known for not taking the brightest amounts of light. So you don't necessarily need to give your philodendrons bright light, but if you're giving your plants less light, you need to water accordingly. So basically, when you give your plants more light, you water more often, and when you give your plants less light, you water less often. That's kind of a no-brainer in a sense. So this philodendron I have probably about 6 feet away from a window, and I have it in a very porous mix, as you can kind of see right here. So I have a lot of perlite and some charcoal and some orchid bark in my mix. I think perlite is the most important thing to add into your mix. I've definitely talked about my houseplant mixes before. I think I talked about it recently in my how to repot a houseplant video, so you can definitely go check that out if you're curious to see what my standard potting soil mixture is for my plants when I repot them. But I like to add perlite into my mixture because it really helps aerate the soil and it helps my plants drain. Overwatering plants is the #1 way we kill our plants at home, so to avoid that I add perlite into my mix. And I know right off the bat that philodendrons really like to drain, so I make sure to use a nice porous mix with this perlite. So philodendron pedatum, a really wonderful plant. I just absolutely love the shape of the leaves. I think that's my favorite thing about it, but philodendrons in general are very exciting, but this one just really has a place in my heart. My second pick for my favorite aroids has to be my Monstera deliciosa Variegated Undescribed. Now, if you've been following my channel for a little bit, you might know that I have this variegated Monstera that doesn't quite fit in the category that exists already. So it doesn't have the white that classifies it as an Albo Variegata, it doesn't have the cream variegation that would make it a Thai constellation, and it doesn't have the yellow variegation that would make it an Aurea marmorata. So this is a plant that falls in its own category, therefore we refer to it as a Monstera deliciosa Variegated Undescribed. And it has this beautiful lime green variegation that's almost so subtle it's kind of hard to see. My tip from me to you today is, whenever you're purchasing a Monstera, for the most part at whether it's a big box store or a small owned plant shop, typically when they're in 4-inch pots, 6-inch pots, 10-inch pots, or even 14-inch pots, they are usually grown from seed. Now, when your Monsteras are grown from seed, there is a very, very small chance, but still a chance, that they can produce a spore of a variegation. So it could be the white variegation, the yellow variegation, or even this green variegation right here. And I'm sure there are other ones out there that exist. There's probably many more forms that are out there that exist. When these plants are grown in clusters of whether 5 plants to 15 plants per pot, depending on what size pot you're purchasing, there is a very small chance that one of those plants in the pot could have been variegated. And when these plants are variegated, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the plant. So kind of a side note, but I have seen Monsteras and also Pilea peperomioides, if we're getting specific, have one single variegated leaf on the plant, and it doesn't last throughout the whole rest of the plant. Therefore, it's not worth as much in some people's eyes because the plant only has one variegated leaf and isn't producing constantly variegated leaves. So just something to keep in mind. So this variegated Monstera right here goes all the way back to the beginning of the plant, and I can also see it in the stem that it's variegated. So just a note, but when you guys are plant shopping, specifically at the big box stores, I feel like they would miss it over, people working at plant shops might notice this over the people working at the big box stores. So definitely look through the Monsteras if you're looking to purchase a Monstera or you're looking for a variegated Monstera, because you might be surprised what you could find. I don't think I realized how difficult this plant is to hold and talk about at the same time when I was making my list. So my third pick has to be my Thaumatophyllum spruceanum. This is probably one of my newest plants that I'm going to be talking about today, so I don't really have many care tips because it hasn't even put off a new leaf for me, but I love this plant and I have to talk about it. So Thaumatophyllum is a new genus of plants. It used to be a subgenus of philodendron, so this plant used to be referred to as Philodendron Glorysome. One of the most common Thaumatophyllums out there has to be Thaumatophyllum bipentatophytum, which you would more commonly hear to as Philodendron cellulum or Philodendron hope, but it is actually a Thaumatophyllum, as is this plant. So my love for my Thaumatophyllum bipentatophytum is how I had been lusting after a Thaumatophyllum spruceanum for a very, very long time, and my wish was finally granted just a few months ago. So I'm very excited to have this plant in my collection. I wish it would grow a little bit faster, but I really am excited about this beautiful plant that I have in my collection. Thaumatophyllums are very closely related to philodendrons, as I said, but I've noticed that Thaumatophyllums prefer a little bit more brighter light in general compared to philodendrons. So while your regular philodendrons probably would not appreciate some direct sunlight, your Thaumatophyllums would probably appreciate a lick or two of direct sunlight. So just something I've noticed. I can't speak on behalf of everybody else's care for the Thaumatophyllums, but I have noticed my Thaumatophyllums really appreciate a little bit of extra sunlight compared to like my Philodendron pedatum or another philodendron I'll be talking about later in this video. So yeah, this plant I also know is a little bit more drought tolerant, or I've noticed at least, than regular philodendrons. So this Thaumatophyllum, as well as my Thaumatophyllum bipentatophytum, I water not very often at all, and I've noticed if I water them too often that I will typically have a leaf, my lowest leaf, start to yellow and fall off, which does happen naturally as the plant forms its trunk that you can kind of see here that's forming. So it's very natural to lose a leaf over time, but I just noticed that if I water it and I'm like, oh, I think I might be watering this too much, that's when a leaf starts to yellow, and maybe it's not correlation and it's just coincidence, but who knows? So I'm just sharing my tips from me to you. That's what I'm here to do. So yeah, Thaumatophyllum spruceanum, if you ever come across one that is a decent deal, I highly recommend picking it up because it is not an easy plant to find and it is so gorgeous. I love it so much. Alright, I'm pretty sure this is actually the most recent plant I have acquired on this list, so once again, I don't really have any care tips, but this is an Amydrium zippelanium, and I'm loving this plant. I haven't had it very long. I only got it when I did my Steve's Leaves unboxing video a month or two ago, but my favorite thing about this plant is how these leaves look like they belong in the fern or palm family, but they are no doubt an aroid. Who wore it better? They look just like a hand. It's so funky. Really, really cool plant. I've been really psyched to watch this one grow. It hasn't grown incredibly for me. It's just put off like a little bit of runners. And I have gotten one new leaf right here. So we're growing, we're just growing slowly. So still learning about this plant. As I said, I really just water it when it's dry, and I've noticed that if I have gone too long about watering it, it definitely gets a little droopy, but it pops right back up by the next day when I water it. So I don't get scared anymore when I find it's a little dehydrated, so I just water it and I don't worry. So this plant also isn't exactly inexpensive. If you do find this plant for a good price, I would highly recommend picking it up, especially if it's on your wish list, because the way some of these plants have been going, the price might just keep going up. So definitely get it sooner than later. A really, really funky aroid that doesn't look like an aroid, and that's probably why it's on my list today as one of my favorites. My fifth pick for my favorite aroids today has to be my Philodendron Glorysome. This is probably the plant on my list that is most Instagram famous, if you will, and let me tell you, there's a reason why this plant is so popular. It's got wonderful velvety leaves, it has this beautiful white veination to it, and some incredible iridescence that is not showing up with the light that we have supplied today, but this plant is the whole package. Let me tell you, plant friends, there's so much to love about this philodendron. If you are looking to try a new philodendron out, if you're just getting started with philodendrons, I highly, highly recommend gloriosum. This is another one where I've noticed the price has been going up a little bit, so I'd say get it sooner than later if you want it, or if you can find it for a good price, good on you, because they are usually not a good price. I've read that this plant is not easy to grow, and I have to say, besides giving this plant a little bit of extra humidity and giving it some light from my grow light because it's a little bit deeper in my room, this plant has been growing incredibly well for me. In fact, it's been growing so well that it has crept all the way along the pot and it reached the lip of this pot, which is a little high compared to where it's potted, and it snapped the new leaf that was coming in, so I had to chop it back, as you can kind of see, so it has some more room. So I've chopped this one back and propagated it, so I even have another one that I'm growing at another location in my home. So yeah, this plant is really exciting where you buy one, and as with most aroids in general, as long as your plant grows well for you, you can really just buy one and have as many as you want forever. So that's a really exciting thing. A really easy plant to grow, a really beautiful plant to grow. So if you're looking to try out a new philodendron, highly recommend Philodendron Glorysome. There is so much to love about this plant. Now, there are so many lovely aroids out there. It was very hard to make this list. I do have to give an honorable mention to my Thaumatophyllum bipennatophytum for sparking my love for my Thaumatophyllum spruceanum, as well as my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma for just growing like crazy. So really, really love that plant. Oh, and of course my Scindapsus pictus, because I talk about it in like every video, but I thought I would spare you guys one video and not talk about Scindapsus pictus. So my sixth pick for my favorite aroids today has to be my Syngonium, podophyllum, Albo Variegatum. Now these look kind of different in color, but to be honest, this is just the tip of this vine, so they're probably just like newer leaves, and I cut them back and I propagated them both because I had one long spindly vine and I wasn't happy with the way it was looking, and I love this plant so much, so I decided to cut both of them back, and then so I have these two plants propagating as well as that vine that I had cut back that these came from regrowing, so eventually I'll happily have all three of these plants growing together, and I will turn my one Syngonium, podophyllum, Albo Variegatum into three. So that is something I'm looking forward to. This plant, I've had it for about a year at this point, and I've been really, really enjoying watching it grow. If we're being real, I had a nice full plant at first, but I left it in a spot overnight, and my roommate's cat like ate it, the whole thing, so I was like devastated, and I had been like coming back off of that ever since, and I had one vine left that was growing, and that one vine was growing beautifully, so now we're on the road back to having a nice full pot of Syngonium, Albo Variegatum, and we are going to be keeping this plant very far away from my roommate's cat because, well, obviously I have been for a very long time because he really likes this one for some reason, and I know it's not good for him. You don't need to tell me, I'm aware, but I really, really love this Syngonium. I'm not like a huge sucker for variegated plants, but this variegation is just like the best variegation on planet Earth, in my opinion. So really, really recommend this plant. This is a variegated plant that will not cost you a pretty penny, if we're being real. It's not inexpensive, but it's not like an expensive plant in general. So if you're looking for a fun and slightly inexpensive variegated plant to grow that does more for you than your Marble Queen pothos or your variegated Scheffleras, I highly recommend seeking out a variegated Syngonium podophyllum. They're just so incredible. Just keep it away from your cat because they will destroy this thing. Alrighty, thank you guys so much for joining me today while I talked about my favorite aroids. Aroids are one of my favorite things at the moment in the plant world, so it's really fun to talk about which ones I am loving the most at the moment. Let me know what aroids you're loving the most at the moment as well, and if there's any aroids I should keep an eye out personally to add to my collection. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at PhillyFoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great time!